Okay, today we are looking at rules of exponents, other rules of exponents. Way back in chapter 4, we learned some basic rules of exponents. If you remember, we had negative exponents and positive exponents. We multiplied things with exponents. We added things with exponents. And we had exponents raised to the 0 power. We're going to learn a few more rules today. We're going to add to what we already know. So much of this is a review, but there's a few new things you've got to pick up. Okay, let's get into this. Let me get a pen that works. That's good. Okay, so the first power property we're going to look at is the power product property. So if you've got two things multiplied together and it's raised to a power, that is the same thing as taking each individual thing, raising it to a power, and then multiplying. In other words, multiply first here and raise to the power second. Here, raise to the power individually first, then multiply. It's the same thing. Okay. The next one is the quotient property. You can divide and then raise to a power, or you can raise each number to a power and divide. It's the same thing. Okay. This is a little simpler because we're getting rid of parentheses. And the power of a power. So when you have two things in parentheses that have powers on them already, and you're raising that to a power, what I call it is distributed property. It's not, but that's what I call it. You're basically distributing this power inside the parentheses. So once you put this power here on this m, it's m times n. Okay, when you raise a power to a power, you multiply the exponents. Basically, is what it's saying. Okay, and that's what we have here. Okay, so let's kind of get into a few of these problems. Okay, the first one, looking at 4y raised to the third, we're going to put the power inside the parentheses. We're distributing the power. So that becomes 4 to the third, y to the third. And with most of these, I think we can simplify. So that's going to be 64y to the third. I'm writing a little crooked. Okay, here, again, distribute. So it's 3 to the fourth, x to the fourth, and that gives me 81 x to the fourth. Okay, 3 to the fourth is 81. Here I have negative 7 squared and b squared. Well, negative 7 squared is a positive 49. And then you have b squared. The best thing to remember is if I have an odd exponent, there's a negative inside the parentheses, it stays negative. Here we've got a negative 5 cubed m cubed. Okay, and that's 5 times 5 times 5 gives me 125. That is cubed, so it's going to stay negative, and that's m cubed. Okay, here, distribute the 3. You get 2 to the third, x to the third, y to the third, and z to the third. 2 to the third gives me 8. That's x3, y3, z3. Okay, distribute the exponent here. You get 9 squared, a squared, b squared. 9 squared becomes 81, and that's a squared, b squared. Okay, here we have 2 distribute, 2 to the fifth, m to the fifth, n to the fifth. Okay, 2 to the fifth I think is 32, m5, n5. Okay, here we have the square goes on the 4, so 4 squared I'm going to go ahead and do it is 16. Then I have x squared, y squared. Okay, and that gets rid of the parentheses. That's what we're trying to do, is simplify it a little bit, so we're getting rid of the parentheses. So you're just basically distributing that 3 inside. Okay, let's look at a few others. Here we have division problems, but still it's pretty much the same thing. So we're going to take the 2 and distribute it. So I have a squared over 6 squared, which is going to be 36. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Okay, just both of these are squared, and that gets rid of the parentheses. Here we have x squared on top, and when you square negative 9, you get a positive 81, so it's 81. Okay, here a little more complicated, but still, you're going to square everything on top and square everything on bottom. So it's going to be 5 squared, which is 25, x squared, over negative 2 squared, which is positive 4, y squared. Okay, just like that. Here, we're going to put the 2, distribute the 2. We're going to square the top. So it's going to be 3 squared, which is 9, x squared, and then square the bottom, x2, y2, just like that. Okay. Here, I've got b over c to the third. So it's just going to be b3 over c3, just like that. And negative 2 over n to the fifth. Well, that's an odd number exponent. We have a negative. It's going to stay negative. Okay, so it's going to be a negative. Well, 2 to the fifth, I think we said a while ago, was 32. So it's negative 32 on top and n to the fifth on the bottom. And we're good. Now, these are not negative exponents. These are negative numbers. Remember, in negative exponents, we move to the bottom. Negative numbers, we don't mess with. So it's just negative 32 over n to the fifth. Okay, next slide. Okay, here we're going to, again, we have a power raised to a power. So you just multiply the powers. So it's 2 to the third raised to the fourth. It's going to be 2 to the 12th. We're not going to simplify. We're going to leave that as is. We're not going to evaluate. Okay, now, I know the temptation here is to add and get 0, but you're multiplying. So it's not 5 to the 0. It's 5 to the negative 16th. We are going to fix that. A negative 16, the negative tells me to put it in the bottom. It tells me to put it in the denominator. It's a numerator right now, or basically flip it. So that becomes 1 over 5 to the 16th. I hope that's coming back to you. Okay, here we have x12, y12. Again, we're distributing and we're multiplying the powers. Okay, here, multiply the powers. You get z negative 10, but that negative tells me to flip it or put it in the denominator. So it's 1 over z 10. Okay. Here, multiply the powers. You get 4 to the negative 5. Negative tells me to put it in denominator, so it's 1 over 4 to the fifth. Okay, multiply. We get x negative 6, y positive 8. The two negatives give me a positive when I multiply. The negative 6 goes on the bottom. The positive 8 stays on top, so it's y8 on top, x6 on the bottom. Okay, here, distribute all the way through. We're going to put it on 3 things. It's 3 to the negative 2. It's x to the negative 6, and it's y to the positive 4. 3 to the negative 2 and x to the negative 6 go to the bottom. Y to the positive 4 stays on top. So it's y4 on top. I'm going to go ahead and square 3. It's going to be a 9, and it's going to be x6 on the bottom. So it's y4 on top, 9x6 on the bottom. Okay, here, distribute. I get x4, y10, z negative 6. Again, I'm just multiplying these powers together. Well, the only one that has an issue is this one. So if I just take it and move it to the bottom, I'm good. So it's x4, y10 over z6. Okay, next section. When you're doing scientific notation, you're squaring both things inside. So what I want to do is square the first and square the second. Well, squaring the first is just 3.1 squared. With some of these, you may want a calculator. I think they're easy enough numbers, but you know, use your judgment. 3.1 squared, I believe I've got 9.61 when I square that. And then I get 10 to the 16th power because you multiply. Yeah, you're not squaring 8, you're multiplying it by 2. So it's 10 to the 16th. Okay, here I want to square 2.1, and I believe that's 4.41. Okay, and here I want to multiply the powers, and it's 10 to the negative 10. Now with scientific notation, we leave the negative exponent alone. We certainly don't want to put this in a denominator. This is set up like this, and we want to leave it like that. Okay, here we're going to distribute the 3. So 1.7 to the third power. I do need to figure that out here in a second. I've got 10 to the negative 27. So let's look at 1.7 to the third. 7 times 1.7 times 1.7, we get 4.913. 4.913 times 10 to the negative 27. Okay, one more slide, and I think we're good. Nope, back it up, back it up. There we go. Okay, the square pages of the world's tiniest book are about 2.5 times 10 to the negative 3 meter on each side. What is the approximate area of one page on this book? So area is length times width. Well, it's a square, So we're just going to basically take one side and square it. Okay, so it's one side squared to get the area. I square 2.5. Well, that's like 25 squared with the decimals. You know 25 squared is 625. So it's 6.25. And then I square this, meaning I multiply the powers. I get times 10 to the negative 6. And that is going to be square meters because it is area. And that pretty much sums up more rules of exponents.